I went and listened to Mike Zago play music.
Huh.
What's your band called? Is it like Bigfoot County?
Yes, it is called Bigfoot County. That is correct. As one of the bands, yes.
It's really, you guys are great. I really enjoyed it. And he's got a good voice.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, come to a show. We're playing, what's the next one? It's McMiniman St. Patrick's Day Festival or whatever on the 14th. Yeah.
That's nice. We should work that into the water anniversary sometime.
Yeah, can you go for the good water song, Mike?
Sure. There's several you can incorporate.
Awesome. Okay. All right. I think we're set, Aubrey.
Okay, so we're going to do just a quick welcome. We'll do the agenda, then we'll do a round of introductions, a little bit of business, and then we'll get to our main topic today. But welcome, everyone. So this is our March 2026 City of Bend Water Advisory Group meeting. Thank you all for being here. Over at last month and this month, we have two kind of special topics. We usually spend our time on water conservation and stormwater management, but today we've got special guests from Oregon Water Resources Department. We're going to do a little bit of water rights discussion. So excited and looking forward to that. And thank you both, Carolyn and Jeremy, for being here and willing to dive into this topic with the advisory group. We also have another guest. So Frank has expressed interest in joining the WAG. So we'll get an introduction shortly from you as well, and you can kind of meet some of the other WAG members. So with that, we can get started. We'll have from 11 to 12:30 today, per usual. And of course, we do record these meetings. So for WAG members who weren't able to join, or if you know somebody else who's really excited about this topic and want to share, we'll make that recording available moving forward. You should get it up in a couple business days. We also are going to make the 100 Years of Water update a reoccurring little teaser part of these meetings moving forward. And we have a little premiere of the first video. That's the water history video that we'll share. It's very short, but looking forward to being able to get that in front of this group and get your reactions to it. And then we'll get into our main topic. So we're going to talk big picture, water rights, Oregon, Deschutes Basin, and then be able to kind of talk about how that applies to the local picture in Bend and planning for resilience and responses to different situations like drought and so forth. We usually approach our WAG meetings with some specific discussion questions where we're looking for WAG input. This meeting is a little bit more about information sharing and just, education and a chance to be curious. And I'm sure that Jeremy and Carolyn will welcome questions as we go. But no specific things that we're looking for input on today. All right, so just a little bit of business. We always like to recap the most recent meeting. So in February, we had a chance to bring another special topic to the table, and that was around gray water. And we're looking to accomplish a couple of things with that conversation. One, satisfy the interest of WAG members in that. And also there's this council goal to explore the potential of gray water. And so it was interesting to talk through that with this group, talk about the trade-offs of, kind of water conservation potential of that, as well as just individual interest from homeowners and community members in making gray water part of their households. So if you scan down to the bottom of the slide, that's where we kind of landed with some of the considerations that might be part of exploring this kind of city benefit or use of gray water moving forward. So thinking about land use and lot size as key things to look at and evaluate trade-offs for customer type, multifamily, commercial, industrial were some of the things where we talked about there might be more potential benefit with those larger users. And then we talked about the differences between the indoor and outdoor applications as well, and kind of the year-round benefit of an indoor use versus the seasonal considerations if you're using an outdoor, certainly with Bend's, weather, you never know from one year to the next what that might look like. And also just the complexities of permitting for that outdoor component, with DEQ being another piece of the puzzle. And a special thanks.
Aubrey.
Yeah.
I'll just add a note for everybody to recall is that Dan Denning, with the evaluation he's doing right now with the water conservation program, he'll use these last bullet points to work with his consultant Madaus on creating a gray water option to evaluate for cost benefit.
Yeah, perfect. So that's kind of the steps forward. There is more in the bullets that are at the top of the slide. That's just the diverse range of experience and perspectives we have on the group. Again, we talked about redevelopment versus new development. We talked about the different permitting pathways, kind of the information needs around that to make that clear. I think Mike in particular, you shared that there is interest in this, but a lot of homeowners maybe get dissuaded as they look at the permitting and the logistics, that designing a separate system from a developer perspective is, often cost prohibitive. There's a lot of other goals that developers in the community are trying to meet too. But maybe there's something like a regional approach, as we talked about with the stormwater facilities, that might be applicable in this case as well. So a couple of points there. I guess I'll just pause if anybody from the WAG wants to provide their own addition here to this list of takeaways from February meeting or any follow-up. Okay, so moving into the next little piece of the puzzle. This was hidden in the agenda. Hopefully you all had a chance to at least flip through and see the annual report highlights that Elizabeth and Dan had provided relative to their two programs, the water conservation and stormwater program. If you didn't see that, it's in the agenda packet that went out and posted to the website too. So do take a look. Some nice highlights, milestones from both of those programs might prompt some future questions as we move forward with our conversations with the WAG too. And then I want to do the 100 Years of Water update. So, Lori, before I share the video and so forth, is there anything you wanted to say about the webpage or general campaign?
Well, let's see. So the webpage is live. Everybody's received that. We went to council announcing the 100 Years of Water celebration. And we'll continue rolling things out. What we're going to and we've ordered swag, so pretty soon we'll make sure everybody gets some swag. Got some cool mugs coming and stickers and with the cool water drop thing on it. I think the first really big public rollout event will be at Earth Day. Where we'll have a lot of activity, but we've been working on we contracted to develop 3 professionally made videos to talk about water. And the first one's about water history. And we have a final draft version to share. So I don't know, Julie, if there's a newer version. I shared with Aubrey what I had from last week. She was just going to do the video.
Great, that should be an updated version then.
That's okay. All right. So Aubrey's going to show everybody. So it'll look better when it's posted to our website because it'll be like full screen and all that. Right now you're looking at like the draft version, but you guys get a chance to see the history as presented by Kelly Cannon Miller, who's the president director of the Historical Society in the museum. So pretty cool. All right, go for it, Aubrey.
Awesome. Okay, so holler, the sound should come through in this share, but holler if that's not the case. Here we go.
As you probably know, we're lucky to have some of the best drinking water in the world right here in Bend. That's why we will be celebrating 100 years of Bend water throughout 2026. The city didn't always oversee our water system. A private utility company founded in 1904 originally oversaw the water system. Back then, the city got its water from the Deschutes River, right in the middle of town. But the river's water quality was impacted by activities like logging and upstream reservoir flows like Crane Prairie. In 1923, the Oregon State Board of Health informed the Bend Water, Light and Power Company that the river water was not suitable for drinking without filtration. In June of 1924, the residents of Bend overwhelmingly voted to create a city municipal water system. City officials searched the nearby forests looking for a clean, pure water source. In 1924, they identified Bridge Creek as the best source of drinking water and built a pipeline to deliver it to Bend. The water quality and clarity was, and still is, some of the best in the region, fed by Bridge Creek and Prowl Springs deep in the Deschutes National Forest. Second, because the water source is so high up, the city can largely rely on gravity, not pumps, to get the water to Bend. And finally, because the creeks are on Forest Service land, the watershed is protected from pollution and future development. In 1926, the city purchased the water system and started building the infrastructure to deliver Bridge Creek water to Bend. And 100 years later, we're still reaping the benefits of that investment. As our city has grown, we've made sure our water supply has kept up. In the 1970s, we added a second source. After acquiring groundwater rights, the city purchased its first well from a local mill. Today, the city owns and operates more than 20 wells, which draw from a large, deep underground aquifer. Having two sources of water, both groundwater from wells and surface water from the protected municipal watershed, makes Bend special. And while we're busy planning for the next 100 years, we want to make sure we celebrate this big milestone with you. Join us as we celebrate a century of water and tell us why you love Bend water. Visit bendoregon.gov to learn more.
So what do folks think? I think it'll run better when you get it on your own computer. It won't do the jittery thing, but anyways, I'm pretty happy with it.
Awesome. Yeah, great.
Cool. All right. Well, more to come. Oh, Bronwyn, thank you.
And I think I bought us a little bit of time, but before we kick things over to Carolyn and Jeremy, why don't we do our quick little introductions just so folks have a sense of the perspectives in the room. And maybe, Lori, do you want to start on your side of the table in the conference room? And then we can do our online folks.
Start in person. Everybody knows me. I'm Lori Faya with Water Services Department.
I'm Angela Reinhold with the Oregon Water Resources Department.
Shannon Ostendorf with Deschutes County.
Jeremy Giffen, Deschutes Basin Water Master.
Carolyn Suffit, Central Region Manager, Water Resources Department.
Dave Allison, Landscape Architect.
Ken Cochran, Walnut Group.
Frank Turek, I worked as a consultant with water for like 30 years. When I found out about the committee or the advisory group, I wanted to join and volunteer.
I'm Julie Lowy. I'm the Communications Coordinator for the Water Services Department here in the city.
Brittany Barger, Principal Engineer over our water and our stormwater capital improvement program at our engineering department. City.
Awesome. Okay, so welcome everybody in the conference room. And then Brian, why don't you kick us off online?
Sure. Brian Wilkinson, Principal Civil Engineer with AKS Engineering.
Brian, Mike.
Mike Sabo, landscape architect here in town.
And Mark.
Mark Buckley, environmental economist, Eco Northwest, and with the city's environment committee.
Bronwyn.
Bronwyn Mastro, Landscape Architect at Bend Park and Rec.
And Rick, we're giving you a break from camera, but do you want to say hello?
Rick Martinson, High Desert Hort Center, Winter Creek, all sorts of different hats.
Okay, so this is our crew for today. And then I think, Carolyn, you're going to share from your screen. We'll get into our main topic. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Bend WAG Group, March 2026 presentation with myself. I'm Central Region Manager for Oregon Water Resources Department. And also with me is Jeremy Giffen. He's our Deschutes Basin Water Master. He's been with the department for 30 years. I'm 2.5 years in, so a lot less experience under my belt, but we have prepared a lovely discussion for you guys. Originally, this was kind of pitched as a Water Rights 101 sort of course, and what we really wanted to get into was kind of the history behind how the water rights in this area were developed and what kind of considerations go into how things are managed at this point. So we've got kind of our outline there, and I will say we are happy, Jeremy and I are happy to go let you guys choose your own adventure on this. If you guys want to go on mini side quests, that's fine too. We have extra slides prepared that are more water rights centric, but a lot of the interesting things that kind of feed how water rights were developed in this area are the history, the geology, and kind of more modern times, all of these influences of, you know, people coming into this region and how that's changed the dynamic of our water sources here. So that's kind of what we centered our talk about, but feel free to ask questions whenever you want to. And then also, again, if you have a particular interest you'd like us to dig into, I'll probably hand it over to Jeremy since he's got the more of the historic background than I do. But other than that, we will get started. Any questions at this point?
So I don't know if anybody's ever done Leadership Bend, but Jeremy always talks at those. There's always a water talk in May. And so this will probably be what part of that plus other stuff.
Yes, we mix in some other stuff too.
Nice.
But like Carolyn said, if we want to go get lost in the weeds, we're more than happy.
Okay. Do it.
All right, so to start us off, I just kind of wanted to orient everybody to this region for the Water Resources Department. So this is our region. It consists of District 11, which is the Deschutes Basin, and District 24, which is the Crooked Basin. It all was one district that Jeremy was managing until about 3 or 4 years ago. We split the Crooked off into its own district. So we do have another water master who oversees the Crooked Basin. So not as much stuff going on there, but it's busy in its own right. There's a lot of activity on the Crooked River. So he's got his hands full there, and Jeremy's been able to focus a little more on kind of the Deschutes side of things. We really love this map in our department because it's this shows kind of all the water system, surface water systems across the state. And it really shows how little surface water there is in our region. We're kind of this black hole. What makes that even more interesting is the amount of water rights that are surface water rights that we oversee, even though there's not that much surface water in this area. As you can see, overview of the region, we have about 12,000 square miles, about 3,500 water rights, and 125,000 acres of groundwater rights, 260,000 acres of surface water rights. So there's a lot going on. And what that means for our regional staff is we have about 60 active gauging stations where we're monitoring inflows and outflows. This is, you know, things coming into the system and also what's leaving the system, whether that be at like reaches of river that are lower in the basin or diversions from irrigation districts. We have private diversions. So we're kind of doing a large scale water accounting of the region where we've it's really just what's coming in and what's going. Any questions so far? Specifically what we do in our regional role, we're in charge of water distribution and regulation. As I said, we're monitoring flows and we look at reservoir contents. We're looking at people's water rights as they apply to irrigation and agriculture. Municipal water rights. So for City of Bend, we have some quasi-municipals that are like Avion, other more private districts, and then environmental monitoring as well. So we have in-stream water rights we're looking at. We have a lot of habitat that we need to monitor what's coming in and out of the system. So that's all things that our department does. So we're collecting that stream flow data. We're plugging it into a really scary spreadsheet that we call our basin storage report. This was a report that was developed to kind of monitor the inflows and outflows throughout the irrigation season, but things have gotten so complex here, we have to do it year round, basically. We're not quite running it year round, but as we're getting flows that we have to monitor throughout the winter, those things are going to start playing in. So we're kind of preparing for this kind of year-round accounting practice. And that's gotten very complicated. So that's our basin storage report. We do monthly meetings with irrigation districts and really anybody who's interested, environmental groups, municipal leaders like Lori might come to those, and it's open to the public. So if people get really curious about where water is going, Jeremy's kind of the master of that spreadsheet. Someday I'll be able to do it too. I'm like maybe 50% of the way there right now. But it is, it's really something to try to keep track of all of this water. Jeremy's claim to fame is he manages down to 1 CFS, so he can really tell where every drop in this basin is going. Other things our department does, dam safety inspections. We do well inspections for new wells, well regulation. And then we do regulation and curtailment when the water flows drop or we have people that we need to shut off based on priority dates. We're in charge of kind of that level of enforcement for everyone's water rights and making sure senior water rights get what they're entitled to. And that can be a pretty complicated and hard process as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy. Jeremy, I'm happy to keep shuffling the things forward and just letting you speak. Jeremy's going to get into our Deschutes history and also the geology and hydrogeology of the region.
Yeah, so I want to say that we have a great history with the city of Bend on doing public outreach. 30 years ago, Roger Prowl and I were running around giving presentations to try and get everyone up to speed on how water works in the basin. And then 20 years ago, that was Patrick Griffiths, and he was a master at slideshows. Guy would make amazing slides. So we have a great partnership on getting the word on how water works in the basin. Brief history, that's the North Canal Dam there, built in 1912. So Central Oregon, obviously because of the lavas and basalts here, was largely passed by settlers. That's why our priority dates on our water rights are a little bit later than the rest of the state. A couple of things that got things going. First was the Carey Act of 1894, also known as the Desert Lands Act. It was first put out there in 1877, but didn't actually make it through Congress till 1894. So it took quite a beating until the final product came out. Next was the Reclamation Act of 1902, although we didn't use it in the basin until later. So the Deschutes River, because it takes large scale work to get a canal off of this, it's not like out in the Crooked River Basin where in an afternoon with a shovel you can scratch a ditch and get water to your crop. Not here. We're you go a couple inches down and obviously we're in solid basalt. So the first canal, the one with the wooden box there, is Swalley Canal in 1899. By 1913, we had given out all the water that shoots, and the state engineer actually withdrew it from further appropriation. All the water was gone. Wasn't even enough water to satisfy all the uses. So we jumped in the upper basin. 1922, we created Crescent Lake Dam. 1922, we also created Crane Prairie Dam. 1949, we did Wickiup Reservoir, which is the largest. The Gentleman's Agreement was something that was pretty popular here until recent years of conservation. But at that dam right there, we would divert the whole Deschutes River up until 1962. We would dry it up from there to Redmond. And so the irrigation districts got together with the predecessor of ODF&W and the water master and had a meeting and said, hey, we need to make that river a little bit healthier from Bend to Redmond. And the irrigation districts go, well, per Oregon water law, we don't have to leave one drop in that river. And they were correct. But they said they left the meeting because we're gentlemen, we're going to leave 30 CFS in the river in perpetuity. And so up until recently, I made sure that there was always 30 CFS going over that dam on its way to Redmond. In-Stream Water Rights Act was passed in 1987. Prior to that, water in stream was considered a waste of water and was not a beneficial use per Oregon water law. So really what's been seen over the last 100 years is a shift from a timber agricultural community using the water to more of a different views on how water should be used here. But we still want to maintain the promises of the past. And that is if you moved here and you were given water, we're going to want to make sure that wasn't taken away from you. So this is a flyer from the Deschutes Irrigation and Power Company. Anyone know what irrigation district that was? That was the Swally Irrigation District. And so they had a flyer out there trying to bring some people to Central Oregon. Oregon accepted the Carry Act in 1901, but they weren't going to fund it. They said private people can come in and put in the ditches, put the water on the land, and then sell the land with the water on it to try and make a profit. So the Carry Act in a nutshell is you were given 160 acres of land as long as you put 20 acres, at least 20 acres to beneficial use. Here's another flyer, kind of the same thing from the Tumalo project. This is from 1926 Western Farmer magazine, went all over the US bragging about the water here. We've got tons of water. You can do anything here. You can raise chickens, grow things that you can't really grow here, but it was to drag people out here. And it worked. But at the end of the day, what we had was a bunch of ditch companies coming out, speculating to make money off of the water situation, and they just couldn't pull it off. They couldn't, because of the soil, because they overestimated. One of the things, like with Tumalo here, is they said, there's so much water, we can irrigate hundreds of thousands of acres. Well, not really. You can do about 30,000 acres off of Tumalo Creek. And so all the ditch companies overpromised, underdelivered, and all of them were dismal failures, went out of business. And at the end of the day, what we realized in Central Oregon in the early 1900s is without the full backing of the federal government putting money into Central Oregon, we weren't going to make a water system feasible here. So the next thing was the Reclamation Act, passed in 1902. When the reclamation was crawling around here for the Deschutes project early on, they were looking at the landscape, and they knew that, if you diverted water, you're going to lose half of it on the way to the field. And so they said, forget this. We have other places in the West that are better for federal dollars going into. So they gave up on Central Oregon. It wasn't until the Depression, FDR said, let's take another look out there. Maybe we can do something out there. And so we whipped forward with the Deschutes project. Part of that was to build Prineville Reservoir in 1960, rebuilt Ochoco Reservoir because it was built with shovels and it was leaking like a sieve. We built Wickiup Reservoir in 1950. That's the picture up there, is clearing the Wickiup site in the late 40s. We rebuilt Crane Prairie Reservoir because the federal government did not want a huge investment with a big rock log crib dam that was ready to go at any minute that could have taken out Wickiup. So they rebuilt Crane Prairie, and they rebuilt Crescent Lake, which was also a rock and log timber dam. So this is, if you look at the date up there in the corner, 1852, this is when we start water rights in Oregon. So go ahead and start it. And the green that's going to pop up on the screen is surface water irrigation water rights.
Hold on. There we go.
So you see down in Southwest Oregon, it starts popping up. Then Lake and Klamath County a little bit. This is all coming off of streams. We're at 1880 now. Crook County is starting to jump into the mix, but you see the big hole in Deschutes County? Like I said before, you just couldn't get water out of the chutes until there was a coordinated effort with the federal government. Now we're gonna start getting some orange color in here, and that's because Oregon passed the Groundwater Act in 1955. And so then we started giving out groundwater rights. And one of the ones that jumps up, if you look at northern Lake County, Christmas Valley, Fort Rock area, is it exploded so much. We actually advertised it, how shallow the water was, and you can see it there. That's Christmas Valley, Fort Rock area. And so we over appropriated that area in the groundwater, and we're dropping, 6 inches a year in that whole aquifer down there. So, and pretty much statewide, we're over allocated. So I don't expect a lot more green or orange on this map going forward. So just to recap, back in the day, all the water's gone by 1913. Well, we can add some water by adding some reservoirs. We did that. And then everything was pretty stable here until I became water master. And then things kind of changed. We started looking at conservation, social pressures changed. So 30 CFS gentleman's agreement I talked about. And now we're about 144 CFS of senior protected water going from the North Canal Dam to Redmond. Flows in the upper Deschutes went from 20 CFS minimum to 100 CFS about 6 years ago. In 2 years, that number will go to 300 CFS. So that's a huge jump. So I wouldn't expect a full Wickiup reservoir moving forward, but the upper river is going to be a lot healthier in the wintertime. Geology and geography, I think I actually used to give this one with Patrick Griffiths, and I loved his line on this, and that was, do you see any streams coming off of this mountain? And there aren't any streams, but given the amount of precipitation that mountain gets, there should be multiple rivers coming off. But if you've ever been up there, if you pour a bucket of water on the ground, it goes one direction and it goes right into that aquifer. So very porous, fake Swiss cheese, broken up Swiss cheese. So that's where we get our water from, and it goes right down into the groundwater aquifer. This kind of shows one of the famous quotes out there was the flow of the river is more remarkably uniform than that of any other river in the U.S. comparable with its size. That's from 1914. So those young basalts and lavas, they do amazing things. We could have a rainstorm that's a big rainstorm for Central Oregon. I'm talking 3 inches, which is pretty rare to get that kind of rain in Central Oregon. The Deschutes River does not move at all. The stream gauging stations can't even tell it rained, but we see it 6 months later when it goes down to the aquifer and comes out. So that's what we call the hydrograph down there in red. And so that shows it's such a tight band between the high flows and low flows. Most streams would be up to the top of that graph and down to the bottom of the graph, but we have very, very stable flows. Mixed and Watermaster are kind of easy. We have situations where the districts will ask me, where do you expect Wickiup to fill this year? And I can guess usually within 1,000 acre feet, which is unheard of anywhere else. But we know that the inflows are extremely stable, not going to change. We know that rainstorms, snowstorms aren't really going to change the dynamic in the short term. So it's easy to forecast what our water budget is. And you can see that at Wickiup and Crane Prairie Crescent, where when those reservoirs were authorized by Congress, they were not authorized for flood control because it wasn't needed. I've had several years where I've had Wickiup nearly full in January, and water managers around the West are going, are you crazy? We're halfway done with winter, but it's that predictable and easy to run. Again, surface water flows. Carolyn showed a slide that we have 60 in this basin. That's the most of any basin throughout the state of Oregon. Just in contrast, I don't know if you remember the water wars back in 2001 in Klamath Falls. Basically same size Watermaster district basin. We have 3 gauging stations down. We have 60 up here. And those are current gauging stations. We've had them historically up and down the chutes every couple miles. So the takeaway from this is, 100 years of that much stream flow. We know where the water's coming from and we know where it's going in this basin. There really isn't through there. And that shows Fall River there. Which kind of it's a large, deep spring in the upper Deschutes that kind of mirrors the natural flow of the Deschutes River. This shows the elevation of groundwater. And so if you see, there's 2 big areas that groundwater discharges in this area. First is up against the Cascades, just to the west of us here, where we have a ton of big springs. Metolius River is a big one. We have them up through Black Butte Ranch. We have all around Wickiup and Crane Prairie Reservoir. That's what really creates the Deschutes River. So you can see where the groundwater table is higher than land surface. So that's all those springs throwing that water out of the ground because it has nowhere else to go. Once you get a little bit to the east, the groundwater table drops quite a bit. Really, the big area it drops is when you're driving over Lava Butte on your way from Sun River to Bend. It falls off, the land falls off about 600 feet, but the water table falls off about 400 to 500 feet. So it's almost water falls off at that area. And that's why when you go through the, the Bend area, really to be in the regional aquifer, you're down 4, 5, 6, get out to Alfalfa, 800, 900 feet, Hampton, 1,000 feet. So it really falls off deeply. Here's the recharge area. Obviously, with that picture of Mount Bachelor, the groundwater recharge is happening in the Cascades where we get the lion's share of the precipitation here. We really don't get any out in these areas. We'll get a snowstorm, where you get a foot overnight and people call my office and say, drop's over, we're in great shape. And it's like, well, no, your lawn will do better. because it's, you know, made it down an inch or two. But we really don't have recharge out there with the exception of the leaky Deschutes River and Central Oregon canals, which are very leaky. So here's a crosscut going from Sisters out to Juniper Butte, showing the groundwater direction. Again, a lot of those springs will come out right where the Cascades, you know, come down into Central Oregon, those springs we talked about. But mainly the big water comes out at the lower, the confluence down to the Deschutes River, Crooked River, Metolius River, which jump up tremendously. We've done seepage runs on the Crooked River, and I've measured in Smith Rock State Park about 8 CFS, gone downstream a couple hundred miles or a couple miles and had 1,200 CFS. So you go from not wanting to step in the water because it'll get my boots dirty to being able to drink out of the water. So that's how much nice, clean inflow there is on the Crooked River system.
I always tell people to stop at the rest area on 97, where you can look down into the Crooked River Canyon and you can walk across the old bridge. And when you look down, look at not only how much water's in there at that point, but all the green along the canyon walls. And that's where it's this huge aquifer is pouring out.
Yep, and you see it especially on looking downstream on the left side. You can see it just all the waters, all the rocks are, and that's the start of the influence coming in, and it really picks up downstream from there. This is Sisters area. We have annual precipitation, and we have a well log out there, and that's just showing how closely they track. We've been given water updates because of the drought the last couple days. And a lot of people are concerned about, you know, where we're at with the snowpack and the precipitation. And a lot of people see the snowpack and think that's the main driver here, but really it's the overall precipitation. So even on a year that like 2015 was a major drought year, our snowpack was worse than it is right now by far. But we were normal on our precipitation, so it really didn't cause as much havoc across the basin. You know, it's great to get that snowpack and that attenuated drain into the aquifer, but really it's the overall precipitation. So if we don't get the snowpack, we like to make it up with rain. This year, we're pretty poor on both. I think we're about 79% on the precipitation day and about 33% or so on the snowpack. So those are bad numbers, and that's going to cause some curtailment later in this year. So here is Fall River. Again, we have since the 30s stream flow record on that. And we also have a well over there. And what we're just trying to show is, you know, how the surface water and groundwater are so interconnected in this basin more than anywhere else I'm aware of.
All right, I'm gonna take back over at this point and talk about some of the challenges that are shaping water management in this region right now.
Well, maybe we should stop just a second. Does anybody have any questions about? So Jeremy really quickly went through kind of how the basin works. And that's it's a really deep and a really thick aquifer. It continually amazes me. You know, the aquifer average is about 1,000 feet thick. And it's a long ways down, but and it's huge. And does anybody have any questions about any of that, like how the water cycle all functions in our basin? Or they can keep going.
I'm curious. So you're saying that current effects aren't so much big full, but it's what would be like for the drought going? What would be long-term effects from this current situation down the river?
Well, that depends. Previous water master used to describe the Deschutes River as a train. Once it gets going, it's hard to stop. And so we're kind of exempt from droughts here to a certain extent, but most of our years have been below average like that. So we can weather a bad one, but we had a lot of bad ones in 20, 21, 22, 23. The natural flow of the Deschutes River dropped down below 1,000 CFS. Never seen it in the history of recording it that low. We've jumped up about 100 CFS because last winter was great on precip and snowpack, the year before just on snowpack. So we were just coming out of that hole, and I was like, all right, no more shutting off irrigation districts. This one's so bad, I think it takes us back down below 1,000. But that's a good question, is Joe had said, our hydrogeologist, that about 70% of the effects of winter will happen later this summer. And then about 20 attenuated out the next year and about 10% of that. So it tails off pretty quick. But the beauty about this system is the Deschutes River, as it comes into Crane Prairie Reservoir, we have a long-term gauge station there. And that shows what the whole Cascade snowpack, when it goes down and comes out of those springs, it goes through that gauge. And it's so predictable that I can say that on August 18th, we're going to peak this year. Although that peak is not going to be very good because we didn't have a lot of snowpack, but it just shows that it's so predictable on the timing and when that comes out. So most of the effects, if that answers what you're after, is most of the effects from this bad water year are going to happen to us in July, August, September, and it's going to drop the natural flow down. The irrigation districts, instead of getting that natural flow, I'm gonna have to drain Wickiup Reservoir to keep their diversions up. And that's the harsh thing about these droughts like this is we can weather them, but we're gonna really pull on the upper basin supplemental water.
Then we related to that, then I mean, I remember wasn't that long ago that the Deschutes wasn't as turbid as it is currently. And was that due to like really draining Wickiup at one point and then just those fine clays are just fully in suspension now?
Yeah, so historically it was built in 1950 and they filled it up and we didn't even see the tower until recent events. But yeah, Wickiup after all those years has about 2 feet of silt in it. And so when we drug it down to the bottom, we were really pulling that stuff out. And we're seeing a couple concerning things. I know back in the day, Crane Prairie, when it was put in, really messed up your ability to pull out of the Deschutes River. Well, we're seeing aquatic growth happen in the river like we've never seen before. And so it's really causing grief for our gauging stations on the Deschutes because we're getting 3-4 foot long weeds growing out of the bottom. And we're trying to find out why is that occurring? Are we holding water in the reservoirs too long for the organics to get going? But when you have that kind of weed growth in the Deschutes, you know, if you slow down the velocity, where the Q equals VA, the amount of flow equals the velocity times the cross-sectional area, the velocity slows down tremendously. So you have to increase the area if you're going to have the same amount of water. So we've been flooding out communities down in, you know, Sun River, La Pine area because the Deschutes just can't carry water like it used to. We get about half the water down that we used to, but that just happens to be the direction we're going with conservation is more flow in the winter and less in the summertime. So,
And that's the habitat conservation plan. So not conservation like our conservation program, but the habitat conservation plan to protect the spotted frog. Yeah.
Or to see, they want to see like natural flows.
What's that?
They want to see like a percentage of natural flows historic.
Yeah, and that's what the first go around in the HCP Habitat Conservation Plan for the northern spotted frog really chopped down on a lot of, we're not going that low in the winter anymore. You're required to have this. At this gauging station, you have to be this, but under this. So really, there was a lot of freedom in being water master in the past in terms of moving the flows around, but that HCP really tied our hands. Everything along the river is targets and requirements. And so it's just really tough because we don't have a lot of flexibility. And I don't think we'll have a flooding situation, but should one occur, that could be problematic. In the past, when we get a big rainstorm and the little Deschutes, which is different from the big Deschutes, runs off, you know, it would jump up to 1200 CFS. I just shut off Wickiup and time them to where it was the same flow in town. You just didn't know where the water was coming from. It was dirtier. But we can't really do that anymore. Our ability to change the flows is really gone away.
But you are saying that the attribution to the turbidity is from the low reservoir pulling us out.
That's,
There's no-
yeah.
Gotcha.
And the immediate was really bad. I mean, it was chocolate milk coming out of Wickiup those first couple of years. And it kind of cleaned out a lot of the silt. But again, when we get down, you know, minus down to 20,000 acre feet in Wickiup, which is possible this year, even though it's pretty full this year, we're going to see that water quality just fall.
As far as vegetation, there are no studies as to what's triggering that. I don't know, temperature change or nitrate, nutrients.
Well, I know some people have looked into it a little bit. There's a lot more water quality probes in the upper basin, but obviously we're quantity people, not quality people. And so we just catch little bits about where it's coming from.
And lastly, sorry, you were talking, there's 60 monitoring stations up here and, you know, as opposed to K Falls as 20, or sorry, it's 2, sorry.
Oh, they had 3 back in the day, but after all the problems in the Klamath, I think we're up to 15 or 20 now. But where I was going with that, it's just, we have monitored the heck out of this basin for about 100 years. And so we really don't have any surprises on where the water comes from.
Gotcha. And I'm just thinking between the two, the discrepancy in the number of monitors, that's all state funding or local funding, it's not federal, it sounds like, based on the history.
Yeah, historically, the USGS was a lot more powerful in these basins and had gauges, but they started, nope, we're not, here you go, state. And so the state runs the lion's share of them. There's still a couple in this basin, about 3 that are run by the USGS, and then our 60 on top of it. But what we found is, you know, those cheap gauge stations take a lot of staff time to run and a lot of cost. We used to throw them in wherever we thought we needed one for science or regulation or different things, but now we're looking to partners. So we don't really put gauging stations in unless someone comes to us with a bag of cash and says, let's join you.
So for instance, the city of Bend pays for 3 gauging stations on Tamalone Creek. We pay between OWRD and USGS.
All right, so I don't think it's any secret for anybody here that we've got water challenges in this area. We have water scarcity and competing interests. So anybody who's lived here for a long time knows our population has exponentially increased. I don't have any numbers on that because I'm not a population person. Maybe Lori does. And then we have a lot of irrigation here, a lot of farming. We have a lot of environmental interest here. So I'm going to go into some of those in a little bit more detail. As far as irrigation districts, we have 8 in this basin. You can see their territories on this map. That's on the DBVC website. So the Deschutes Basin Board of Control is kind of a group of the irrigation districts representing each other and their interests. One thing that's kind of unique about this area is just that a lot of the farming is done through irrigation districts. So there's in other parts of the state, you might see a lot of people with more private water rights, but here it's very irrigation district heavy. We do have private water rights, but there's just a lot of irrigation district and a lot of land that's irrigated through the irrigation districts.
In the split, just so you know, well, on our first slide, one of the ones Carolyn said we have 250,000 acres of surface water. 150,000 of those are in irrigation districts. 100,000 of those are private water rights. So, and what she also showed is that we regulate those. So the irrigation districts have combined about 50 ditch riders out there checking the water use. We have 2 people in our office for the other 100,000 to make sure they're doing it right.
Yeah, one thing on this map, it's funny, it almost looks like Swally has a really huge area, but that's actually the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs Reservation up there at the top.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's a very zoomed out map. So we have gauges on all of the diversions for the irrigation district. So we're looking at what they're taking as it applies to their water rates. And then, of course, irrigation districts are surface water rates. So a lot of people who might be patrons of irrigation districts, they could have supplemental water rights that are groundwater rights. A lot of the private water rights are groundwater rights. So when you're looking at those kind of numbers, you can see this is a graph that shows the types of wells based on use, but then also the amount of water that those wells use. So you can see domestic wells, exempt wells, are a huge amount of the wells that exist in this area, but the large portion of the water pumped comes from irrigation wells. So exempt uses are kind of a thing that's a hot topic right now as well. And we can certainly talk about that if you guys are interested. So what does that lead to that also applies to what municipalities are dealing with is that we have some really extreme groundwater declines happening in this area. The graph shows kind of what we're attributing those declines to. So largely it's climate. We're seeing a lot more dry, years, less precipitation. We have, a quarter that's for pumping for irrigation purposes. And then, as we have modernized irrigation in this region and a lot of canals are getting lined to stop the transmission of the surface water into our aquifer, and since we have this porous ground, there's been a lot of effort and money going into canal lining. And what the interpretation of that is that it's also contributing to our groundwater declines. So we used to have these leaky canals bringing recharge into our aquifer that are now lined, so that that leaking is not happening, and so we're not getting that recharge happening.
Is Joe Kemper's work, so your geohydrologist is doing some work to evaluate like the human impacts on the level of the groundwater
Yeah,
the past 100 years. Like we raised the groundwater level because we have all these leaky canals.
yeah,
And now they're lining the canals, so it's gonna go down.
yeah.
I'm assuming, is his work gonna update that graph? Because I'm wondering if that 10%, there's been a lot more lining.
Yeah,
Recently, whether that's gonna go up.
we probably will update that graphic, and I'm not sure what it's gonna look like. I was able to chat with Joey yesterday, and he grabbed me some information that I put in some slides coming up about that project, so we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I would imagine those figures will change once he gets done kind of with the science part of it.
Yeah.
So these are obs wells in our region, and you can see the legend there at the bottom is kind of showing how much decrease in those groundwater levels we're seeing as we kind of get into the Redmond area. So that's kind of the scary place that where things are decreasing at such a rapid pace that we've had to evaluate how we're going to move forward with groundwater allocation, which I will also get into briefly. You can see that well over by Sisters, that's in the green. That's really close to our recharge areas up on the high Cascade. So we really don't see those effects on wells that are happening kind of up against the mountains. But as you kind of get into the northeastern part of the basin, those groundwater declines become pretty significant.
And I'll add on from Ben's data from our wells is that when you look at our data from like our Outback site, so where our surface water filtration facility is located up off of Skyliners by Phil's Trail, we are not seeing declines there in our groundwater. And then we have wells across town and like over more towards Pilot Butte and the airport. Those we're seeing in the range of 0.5 to 1 foot per year decline. So I simplify it for people and say basically for us in Bend, basically west of the river, we're not seeing declines. East of the river, we are just kind of geographically. It's not because of the river, just geographically.
But that's because Tunnellow Creek is a gaining stream. So there's a lot of groundwater there that's untapped.
No, it's not. Temelo is, first of all, in some cases it's gaining, in some places it's decreasing. Temelo is separated by multiple hundreds of feet from the groundwater. This is just that there's how close you are to the Cascade Mountains is how close you are to the recharge that's occurring. And that's where we're not really seeing declines, but I mean, goodness, it's years of impact of, that you slowly see over time as you go east, because this is one huge aquifer that's, extends from the Cascades over to Prineville, down to Paulina, up to Lake Billy Chinook.
Yeah, and you'll see Prineville also has a green dot there, and just a reminder for the geologic scope of things that we have the different formation that comes in there, the John Day formation. So they have kind of a little bit of a different groundwater situation that comes in over on that side of the basin. This is a little zoom in on some wells out in the Redmond and to Horse Ridge area where we're really seeing the significant declines. So you can see how everything's just like dramatically tracking downward. And then this is kind of a more comprehensive look at what wells throughout the region are doing. So you can see kind of in Sisters, Cloverdale area, we've had a little bit of bobbling up and down, a slight downward track. And then as you kind of get to that northeast area, Lower Bridge, Klein, Butte, and Redmond, you see those really significant declines. Other areas we've seen some pretty good decline is in Lapine. They have a really shallow groundwater table there, and it's very subject to seasonality. So you'll see pretty dramatic up and downward trends there, but also on a, they're on a downward path. And then another look at kind of what the wells in the Redmond area are doing. So as Lori mentioned, we have our hydrogeologist, Joe Kemper, who's looking at the impact of canal lining on these groundwater levels. And a lot of this came from our new groundwater allocation rules, Division 8 rules that were put into place at the end of 2024. So what the department is trying to do with those rules is establish what's a reasonably stable groundwater level and what's an excessively declined groundwater level. And the complication that happens here is we don't know what our baseline was pre-canal influence. So that's what the data that Joe's trying to get. And here's some kind of graphs to illustrate this. The one on the right is looking at what our groundwater levels were interpreted to be, say.
This is pre-piping, yeah.
Pre-piping. And so
100+ years ago.
Yeah. And so our Oswald data is, about 50 years old or so for the most part. So we really don't have data that tells us what things looked at before the canals went in. So we really need to understand what groundwater levels were before we can say something's, reasonably stable or excessively declined. It's just a pretty complicated process.
What you do have is data on the Crooked River of the flows in the river prior to all the canals going in. And then you can see the amount of water increasing going into the Crooked River as those canals were built. And that extra groundwater was, it was going into the ground from the canals and popping out at the Crooked River. And the one unfortunate thing was the gauge site moved when they built like Billy Chinook, but you can still see that same pattern of how it went. Up, the flows in Crooked River went up. And then what was it, the 50s or 60s, it started declining because that's when they started doing more conservation techniques, farming. But
well,
it's like kind of the one piece of data, I guess.
Their actual diversion started going down in. I mean, we started putting less water down the canals.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of variables to consider there. That's why we have our expert Joe Kemper doing a great job. And I think the last time I heard from him is he was hoping to have that wrapped up by the spring at some point, but I don't know fully where he's at with that. I know he's had to do a lot of looking back at records and trying to reconcile a lot of variables with what he's trying to establish.
Believe it or not, when we used to run the old gauging stations on the canals, they worked very well, that old technology. When everyone started jumping over to flow meters, we had just a world of problems. They were getting silted in, they weren't working. So technology actually ruined our stream flow or canal record in this basin, something fierce. So now we have many districts that we're missing 10 years of data from on what they diverted, which is really hampering this process.
And then again, we kind of touched on this a lot, and it's no surprise here. We have a cultural shift in this area. We've got a very robust and engaged community of water users and water interested folks here. A lot of environmental and recreational interests, and a lot of people moving here. So you kind of put all of those things together, and you've got a pretty messy water management problem. So we've had to get creative. We have lots of
acronyms.
Lots of acronyms, yeah. A lot of programs and that have happened over the past couple of decades to try to conserve water, to be creative with how we're using water. And then we have also some newer things that are coming down the line. And we've had a lot of partnerships here. We're a very collaborative, capital C collaborative basin. So I just threw in a bunch of acronyms of things you see, including groups like these. We have you know, the tribes that we're trying to be, you know, really good partners with to make sure we're managing their needs. We have the Deschutes River Conservancy. We have our Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative. We work with the Deschutes Basin Border Control, Central Oregon Cities Organization. We've got Central Oregon Land Watch. So just so many groups here that are talking about water, looking at water, discussing how water use and how we're going to build legislation that makes sense and build programs that make sense. One of the first ones we got into was the mitigation program. So there was a USGS and OWRD groundwater study in 1998 that established that relationship between our surface water and our groundwater, that they were interconnected one for one. You take something out of the ground, it's going to affect the stream and vice versa. Initially, we had some rules adopted to establish this mitigation program, which was appealed by Water Watch, and they didn't want the mitigation program, and so we shoved in House Bill 3494, which said, well, we're going to do this anyway. So here's our legislation. Here's kind of some facts about the mitigation program. So any new water, what the basis of the mitigation program is people can retire their surface water rights and instead take water out of the ground. And the whole point of that was to try to restore surface water flows. Now, we said, of course, that these things are interconnected. So there was a consumptive use coefficient factored into this, how much water would this crop use, and like how we could balance out these water uses. And this program is still in effect today. It sunsets in 2029. So Angela here is kind of leading the next phase of the mitigation program, and has had to dig into really what does this program look like in the future. It's been really, really effective. There is a 200 CFS cap that we've kind of been hitting over the course of I don't know if you have years handy, Angela, but we've just kind of been like right up against that cap for a long time. And some of these uses that have been applied for, you know, they never kind of make it to the final step of things. So we're just right up against the cap. We're right against the sunset of the program. And there's a lot of people who are really interested in continuing this program because it's been effective, and a lot of people who are concerned about, you know, we don't have the science established to show that like this is a good program to keep going.
So just kind of practical reality for the city about the mitigation program. So the way it affects us is our newer groundwater rights. In order to use those groundwater rights, we have to have mitigation credits. So we have to have the ability to show that when we're pulling water out of the ground, a similar amount of water is being put into the Deschutes River, or staying in the Deschutes River. And in general, with the mitigation program, pretty much only the cities are using it because we're the only ones that can afford mitigation credits. So the way you create those mitigation credits is you generally, like maybe an irrigation district will retire some land. They'll transfer those water rights permanently in stream, and that creates the ability for mitigation credits, and we can purchase those mitigation credits. I have to say they're very hard to come by right now. I keep looking for mitigation credits because we'll need some starting in about 20 years. We're okay in the meantime. But there's going to be a lot of discussion about the extension of the mitigation program and the ability for cities to be able to provide water. So that's a huge importance, but it's all about, with the wild and scenic section of the Deschutes River, about maintaining flows in there, and the mitigation program isn't about other issues like if you're pulling water out of the ground, is there less coming out in the Crooked River, for instance, things like that. That's what the tribes are worried about.
Yeah.
So a lot to come on that, but that's kind of the practical reality for us.
Yeah, and there are temporary mitigation credits too. So people who are trying to get water rights, they can purchase temporary. And so that's something or temporary credits. So that's something our department looks at is, making sure people are staying up with their temporary credits, but really everybody wants permanent credits and they're really hard to come by.
Yeah, cities want permanent because we build very expensive infrastructure and we want to know that there's going to be water available. I think the temporary ones are mainly more used for agriculture.
Yeah. Yep. Are there any questions about the mitigation program? All right.
Who's managing the temporary credits right now? It used to be what, a DRC, right?
Yeah, DRC managed them.
Yeah, it's still.
Yeah, I think they're the only ones. There was other banks set up that never really kind of got off the ground. So the Deschutes River Conservancy is the credit holder. So then also kind of, a little bit predating actually the mitigation program, but in the same kind of early stages of conservation, we have the In-Stream Water Rights Act. So this was put forth in 1987. And this allowed in-stream water rights to be held in trust by the state. Initially, they were applied for, there was only 4 state agencies that could apply for in-stream water rights. So they were our department, Water Resources Department, DEQ, ODF&W, and Oregon Parks and Rec Department. So what those departments were doing, they were looking at where there was available water and they were applying for these in-stream water rights to kind of like shore up no more uses of that water. And however, they were junior to other senior uses. So didn't really quite have the effect that, they were probably hoping for. But the other thing that came about was buying in-stream water rights from other entities that would be senior. So that's kind of really what the DRC championed and in this region. And so, people who are retiring water rights, they can put them in stream, they're held in trust by the state, and they maintain their priority date that might be, very senior to other uses. So we have over 200 in the Deschutes Basin. Jeremy does a lot of work to kind of make sure those in-streams are being met when we have those situations where they're more senior to other uses. And a lot of attention on those in this particular region. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, it was interesting. The state, Carolyn nailed it. The state applied for all these in-stream water rights. And then they said, okay, water master, we get the whole creek. And it's like, well, your priority date is 1990. That doesn't work. DRC was formed in 1996. They went out and they thought, oh, we're going to buy up some water rights, put it in stream. Same scenario. They went, hey, that water rate's really cheap. And then they'd buy it. And then they'd say, water master, where's my water? And it's like, well, that priority date isn't even available in the summertime. And so there was a learning curve. And then they go, boom, the light went off. And then they went to the senior most water rights with a bag of cash. Bought those, and it, for the farming community, created havoc because now, but they used to be able to dry up the stream. Now the senior most water goes right past their diversions and they can't take it. So it was a learning process, but it's very effective in this basin. We're ground zero for in-stream water. We've done amazing things like Deschutes Blow Bin, 0 CFS of protectable water. I know I mentioned that gentleman's agreement, but that wasn't a state protectable thing. That was an agreement. Today, 144 CFS senior protected water. I challenge anyone to go across the West and find where more conservation in stream like that has happened.
In this example too, Whitechoose Creek is pretty impressive too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're 35 CFS in the summer and look at it 30 years ago, 25
Yeah,
years ago.
this is what Whitechoose looked like before in-stream water rights. So really crazy what that program has done. The other really effective program dealing with in-streams is in-stream leasing. So most leasing is done within irrigation districts. Again, we have the 8 districts here in Central Oregon. We've seen a lot of their use decrease over, the course of decades as they've gotten more efficient and a lot of water has been able to be put in streams. So some of those efficiency projects are, changing irrigation practices like flood irrigation to a sprinkler or pivot. Lining canals, doing in-stream transfers and leases. And then of course, the big story in this region is piping. So what we're doing is trying to get those transmission losses through the canals back into our streams. in-stream leasing, this is some data that was given to us by the DRC. So it kind of just shows you how effective that program was from its kind of conception at the early or late 1990s up to where we are now. You can see it had a very modest start and then it got very popular. And then things kind of tapered off or got stabilized really for a couple of reasons. We had some really, really dry years. So you'll see that kind of effect in the later part of the graph. And then also the districts really had to deal with some of the effects of, not having this bulk of water to put down their canals, their ditches. It really affects how certain rotations work within the district. So if you don't have enough headwater to kind of push things throughout a lateral, then it creates problems for everybody on that rotation. So the districts also, they've got to protect their patrons. So they were, a little bit like, oh my God, what do? We got to moderate this a little bit. So things have still been really, really effective and popular program to do, but there are some limitations to what it is able to fully do. The other really big program here specific to this region and not so much in other parts of the states was the allocation of conserved water. This was kind of known as legal enlargement in the department, which is enlargement is being able to use more water or put it into different uses than what it was your original water right was for. And so this allowed for conservation projects. This would allow some of that water to go in stream, but then a portion of that water could be reused on a different piece of land or for a different use. So this program was really popular here. We had a ton of funding coming from public projects to do things like canal lining. And the thing that was unique about this region is instead of doing a portion of the water in stream and a portion for a different use, we put 100% in stream. That was because a lot of these projects were publicly funded, so we had to show public interest for them. And it was really the main way to do water conservation in this region until the HCP came along. And so the restored flows we see in the middle Deschutes in the summer, Tumalo Creek, Whitechoose Creek, those were all big projects that had to do with our allocation of conserved water program. And then you can see on that graph that the Deschutes and the Crooked are just largely for this whole statewide program. We are just the bulk of the projects that happened. So that's a pretty neat thing for us to hang around on here.
So the conserved water is they pipe a canal that used to lose 50% of the water as it went through the canal. So that 50% is conserved.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of that or all of that, depending on the project, gets dedicated in stream.
Yes.
Yeah, the program statewide, when it came out, was, and when she said only legal enlargement, there was no way in Oregon water law to add acres. So you could have a flood irrigated parcel that gets tons of water and you could say, okay, state, I'm going to go to sprinkler. Can I irrigate this over here now? Nope, you can't move out of your footprint. So in order to encourage conservation, we came up with the conserved water program, which said, if you save 50% of your water, then 3/4 of that goes in stream. The 25% of your savings, you've gone to new lands. And so in Oregon water law, that was like, that's crazy. We don't let people grow their fields bigger, but we needed to do this. And it was like, well, 3/4 is going to the environment. Let's let them grow a little bit. So it was a good medium ground to let people increase their acreage, but we haven't done that in this basin. This basin has fully been about public buying pipe, district, give us the water savings, 100% in stream. So our program's a little different in Central Oregon, how it's utilized.
Allocation of conserved water was really the gold standard for conservation projects here until the HCP came along. So probably you guys are familiar with this, protections for the Oregon spotted frog as well as a bull trout, I think. And there's a couple other species that might get looped into this later on, but basically this was, we need to restore habitat for the species that are part of the HCP. So this is a federal program, of course. So we, as the department, we just manage the water that is part of the HCP, but we are not party to the HCP. So we have no kind of dog in the fight. We just make sure things are where they are supposed to be. So we kind of act as this moderator role for this program. And so the program is really between the irrigation districts and U.S. Fish and Wildlife about how they are going to manage the habitat for the spotted frog. So that's a pretty complicated program. There's a lot of benchmarks for stream flow, and it's a lot of work. For people who really don't have a stake in it, we do a lot of work to support it, and we're happy to do it. But it is a significant amount of work that was kind of unexpected in some ways for our department. Like, we just didn't realize like how integrated we'd be into this whole process. So it's taken a significant portion of Jeremy's time is helping manage this program.
The initials of ESA, what is that?
Endangered Species.
Endangered Species Act. So the HCP basically, some of the agreements on it were so that the districts would not get penalized for accidental takes of a species. And so they had to kind of come to an agreement on what that would look, how they could help support this program and not get, be liable for what happens to the species. So we have to work really closely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and really closely with the districts for managing this program. And kind of as what we talked about earlier was that this whole program is kind of restoring balance to the upper Deschutes. And these graphics are showing what that looks like. The one on the bottom, you can see the darker blue, green line is kind of what the natural flow of the Deschutes would look like had we not, interfered with all this irrigation and stuff. And so what we created is that green line that kind of, we've got really low flows in the winter, really high flows in the summer. So what the HCP was seeking to do was balance some of this water use that's happened on the system. So right now we have an agreement of 100 CFS released, at least 100 CFS released out of Wickiup Reservoir in the winter. In 2028, that will go up to 300 CFS, and in 2034, 400 to 500 CFS. So this is, as Jeremy mentioned, why we're anticipating we're not really ever going to see a full Wickiup again. That's also probably, I'm assuming 2028 is when Jeremy's going to retire.
Just a quick note, we're about 10 minutes left.
Wickiup will run in the bottom half.
But the surfers will be happy on the river.
So the thing about Wickiup is it holds the majority of North Unit Irrigation District's irrigation water. They are our most junior district. They're up in the Madras, Jefferson County area. They do some of the most productive farming in the region. So they're kind of a big player for our agriculture. And, it's a huge economic part of, that region. And basically their supply of irrigation water, most of their irrigation water for the season is stored in that reservoir. So if they don't have that reservoir, it is economically like really devastating for that region. So
Bigger reservoir.
So one of the newest developments that we've been working on is the Deschutes Basin Alternative Pathway. You'll remember from allocation of conserved water, that put a lot of water into the middle Deschutes during the summer. So districts would do piping projects. That water that would normally be going down their diversion in the summer was then passed and it would go through the middle Deschutes, making the middle Deschutes a healthier system. Since we need to now focus on the upper Deschutes, the alternative pathway is a new process that the department was asked to develop to help restore these wintertime flows. And so what this was centered around is that a district would do a piping project, and instead of putting those flows down the river in the summer, it would pass them to North Unit for their use during the summer. In return, North Unit has to release that equivalent volume of water out of the reservoir in the winter. So senior district gives some of their water to junior district during the summer. Junior district releases out of their storage in the winter, and that's how that balance works. And so this wasn't really a process that was possible with our allocation of a conserved water program. So we have spent many years developing this process. We are so close to the finish line. It has been a really challenging process because it kind of goes outside of what our laws were developed around in water law. So we've had to get really creative. And, you know, it's been a hard really process.
So I'm gonna say it's 12:23.
Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left. So I want to kind of figure out what to do here. How many more slides do you have?
Really, we're almost done. And then Jeremy's got all of his like what's going on the ground right now. So if people are really interested in like kind of hydrologically what's happening, we should pass it off to Jeremy.
Okay. And I don't want to miss saying too, just for everybody, is that, you know, there's all this big picture and all this water moving around. And for us municipalities, we're kind of often yelling for this tiny little percentage of water. Because of all the water rights that are allocated across the basin, about 2% are for municipal use. Because people always think that, oh, these people are moving here and they're using so much water, and they're really not. And then doing water conservation efforts, we're trying to keep that, trying to decouple the water use from growth. And also, similarly on the groundwater side, I also use 2% because when you look at the typical amount of recharge that occurs in the mountains, and then you look at how much municipalities are using of groundwater, it's about 2%. So we need to do our part, but we also have to figure out how to balance all these things in the basin. It just makes for very interesting discussions around tables with like 40 different organizations present to figure out how to take the same amount of water and be equitable with it and deal with all the rules around it.
Yeah, so I had kind of one other slide that was just challenges, like big picture for a lot of this conservation is that we need, you know, we need more funding, we need more time, we need more staff. We've run into these issues with our, you know, our water law, with our process flexibility. And then on top of all of that, we still have drought. And so that's where I was going to hand it over to Jeremy to maybe fly through his hydrologic.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right, we still got here.
If you want little slides, or I can also see, maybe this would be a good place where, are there any like burning questions? And we could take a few minutes at our next meeting if, you know, people think of things, because we'll have two of you here probably at the next meeting. So
I am interested in the exempt wells, like what's going on with them as well, because it relates to UICs as well, and where you can put them in. And everything. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah,
So-
I'm curious too, who's volunteering to have their exempt well monitored?
right. So
We could probably do a whole meeting on exempt wells.
yeah.
So just a quick rundown, if you guys want, just on our water situation.
Yeah.
Right now, what we're looking at. Teacup diagram, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, shows kind of what things are running in the basin. Wickiup and Crane Prairie look really full. We have US Fish and Wildlife and Wickiup water sitting in there as part of that process Carolyn was talking about. So this is probably looking pretty good in terms of how the basin's looking, but it really is a poor view of what's actually going on. Snowpack at 33%, that's basin wide. That's the third worst I can think of in the last 50 plus years, probably even going further back than that. Go ahead. The overall precipitation, 83, I think we're back down to like 80 now because it hasn't been raining too much. But again, north and south of us doing a lot better. Those two things together equal poor water year coming up. There we are on our snowpack in the upper Deschutes. You can see where the black line goes below the red. That means we were breaking records during that period. But these last couple little snowstorms have got us back up to where we're just bad now, not record breaking. Precip was not as bad as snowpack all year. We even got up in the end of December, almost to normal. But again, we don't expect too much out of this going forward. This is total precipitation. Again, where we add them together, that's a scattered diagram for the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years, 40 years there. Showing that, we're getting a lot more, especially recently, below average snowpack years. 4 years above, 8 years below. That's really dragging down the natural flow. So this is a slide showing one of our snow-tell sites, NRCS snow-tell sites up in the Cascades. And those snow courses have been in effect for almost 100 years. But this just shows, you know, how are we looking over the long period? And the watermaster here from 33 to 60, Aubrey Perry, used to say if we have 30 inches of water in the snowpack by April 1st, we're going to be okay. You can look back at 2015 in there at about 6 inches, 5 inches. Terrible year. But we had some precip that year. This is the snowpack though. And look at 2026. So not a good overall water year. And look at that snowpack down there. So in order to be okay, we have to be up at that 30-inch line. We've got about 3 weeks to get there. Ain't gonna happen. I'd be shocked if we get to 10 inches. So we're gonna be less than a third of what we need to be okay for runoff from the springs in the upper basin. And that's all I had on it.
1 minute to spare.
So
And that's Aubrey right there on the left.
Where
That was-
where are the stations? Are they kind of on the high points of the peaks?
Yeah, and that's a problem with the snow-tell sites is they grab the highest peaks throughout a basin. So when people look at it, they're like, oh, wow, we're at 60%. Well, that's 1% of the land area that we're looking at. We don't have them spread down at the lower elevations. We have a New Crescent Lake and Chemalt Alternate, which are down on the valley floor, kind of give a picture there. But when people say, like today, we're going to do the news for KTVZ, and they're going to say, what's a snowpack? I'm going to tell them, and that doesn't take into effect that those other ones are extremely low, and mid-elevation snow is gone, low elevation's gone. It's not a complete picture. So we're working with NASA now, who's doing looking over the whole basin, and they can see the depth of the whole basin. And so they're given a complete picture of how much do we have a basin wide instead of the 10 sites that we have at the tops of the highest peaks throughout Central Oregon. So,
So someone has to actually go hike up there to measure it, or is there data? Is it like a?
well, it's real time like our stream gauging station. So at midnight, they update it every single day. So
like
it's,
pressure gauge or something?
yeah, it's a snow pillow, it's called. And so that knows the weight. And so now we know the water content, and they have a one that melts in a tube. So it hits and percolates down. And so they can tell the water how much precipitation. They're really great, and it's a wonderful service put on by the NRCS. You can go on their site and go all the way back 50 years. They've been running these things. And for water managers, when we have a big storm at night, I get up at 2 in the morning and I check the sun. Oh, wow, look what we got. And so we can have
I
it real
love
time.
water nerds.
But these guys used to snowshoe and ski all the way up there to the same sites. And on his back is the snow-tell pole that you put in the ground, and you weigh it and you get the water equivalent. I gotta tell you, my job's a lot easier than his listening.
So I'm gonna cut it off. We're a minute or so past time, and thank our speakers for this. We can, if people think of questions, go ahead and email them in, and I can have answers for you at the next meeting. I'm really hoping folks will be able to come to the April Fool's meeting. That we've been working hard on some implementation elements of drainage and density that we all talked about during the stormwater master plan effort. And we have some really some key things we want to run by you at that one. So I'm hoping folks will be able to come to that. And you can see the other things on there. I'm still working on, I got like 3 different choices for the June tour, so more to come on that. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
That was really great. Thank you.